Welcome to Visionary Voices Exchange podcast. I'm your host, Janet LaBreck, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here to discuss everything that you thought you knew about blindness. We're available on every major streaming platform, so let's get ready to dive in. We have two great guests that are joining us today, Miss Mary McGuire and Larry Turner, and they both are from Team Academy, and I just want to take a moment to welcome you both here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks, Janet. We appreciate it.
The reason I wanted to talk with you both is the work that you do is incredibly important because it involves youth. And as we know, youth oftentimes have a really challenging situation, particularly youth with disabilities. So we know that oftentimes, when compared to their peers, they don't have the opportunity to do things like experience early work opportunities. And of course, they want to be able to do that, but sometimes the situation is so challenging, they're not sure where they begin. And they're not sure always in terms of what they would like to do. So I thought it might be nice to bring into this conversation, who is Team Academy and who do you serve? So why don't we start there?
So with Team Academy, we really try to focus on transition services. And I know for some of our listeners, they may not know what that means. So for transition, that really what we're talking about is the next step from high school. So everybody exits high school at some point. But a lot of our youth, our students, don't really grasp that there's life after high school and what that is. So that's where we come in. We're those transitional services, and we help make informed decisions so that our students can be as successful as they can be, right? So our goal is to expose our students to a plethora of different options and help them make their best informed decisions that will lead ultimately to their success.
Yes.
For some, that's post-secondary opportunities. For some, that's straight into the workforce. And for some, it's just being as independent as possible at home.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Preparing them to be as independently successful as they can possibly be. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what do these students, what kinds of skills do they come to you with? And what do they say their interests lie in terms of employment? And, how challenging is it for them to identify, specific trades or positions that they may have an interest in, but they really have never had an opportunity previously to really experience those kinds of jobs?
Well, and that we play a big part in that. So that's the thing. When we get a lot of, as we know with any youth, that there's a lot of indecisiveness there just simply because they haven't had the life experience right yet. So that is what we do. We engage them in the community, network them, teach them how important that is. We find out what their interests are through all kinds of assessments that we do. And then, we sit down and we have lessons and we provide instruction and job coaching and mentoring that they're going to need that's imperative to their success. And that's what we want. We want them to understand that they are not just consumers, they are contributors as well. And so it's very important to make sure that we cover all of these things because their interests change, as they grow and develop and they become exposed to all these wonderful things that we provide. And so we want to make sure that we're staying on par with that as we go along so they can be as successfully independent as they can possibly be.
So today we had something kind of interesting happen. So your question was, what kind of interests do we see students come to us with? Mm-hmm. And so today was our last field trip, our last outing outside the classroom excursion with a specific group of students. And some of those students have been in the classroom with Miss Mary since the 9th grade. Mm-hmm. One of them in particular, his biggest interest that he came to us with in 9th grade was he thought that he would love to shovel snow.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yes, in Georgia.
In Georgia. Now we are in Georgia, and We do get snow sometimes where we are, but it's intermittent at best. Nobody's shoveling snow around here. It's not happening.
Right.
But what we do with that is we see an interest, and then we help those students kind of make a decision if that interest that they have is an actionable thing with our current situation.
Yes, if it's reasonable.
So with this student, what we did, Miss Mary, do you want to share about the snow?
I brought a snow machine in, and it was really, really cold. And so then we got out there, and obviously we had a good time. But then we started shoveling snow, and whenever we had that experience and we provided that experience for him, well, that completely changed his thought process, but in the most wonderful way. So what we gained from that was the knowledge of what his interests where it lied, right? Was obviously being outside, doing maybe possibly some kind of landscaping work, which is that's the direction that we moved that in. And, through coaching and showing him these sorts of things and allowing him to have these sorts of experiences that typically otherwise outside of this program he would not have, then he was able to gain that understanding. And now he has had a part-time job for the last 2 summers with a landscaping company here in the local city near us. And he said that's what he's going to do whenever he graduates, and absolutely loves it. But without providing them that experience, he would have never known. And of course, to everyone else, it would have been just a lost cause because, we hear somebody wants to shovel snow here in Georgia and we kind of laugh at that. But there was some substance there, and we just had to find out what direction to push that in, and now it's a wonderfully successful thing.
And so with Team Academy, there are certain things that just is our policy that we do not do. So if a student has a desire or a stated interest that we feel is unreasonable, like shoveling snow in the middle of Georgia, we'd never tell that student, no, that's not reasonable. No, we can't do that. What we do is we actively provide an environment so the student can see that for themselves. Mm-hmm. So we feel like there's enough in society, especially telling folks that have a disability, that they can't.
Right.
So Team Academy never tells someone that they can't. Now, we may realize that this is probably an unreasonable activity, and so we will have activities that help that student see that for themselves and redirect that in a more reasonable direction.
Right. Yes.
And that makes perfect sense. And we often forget that peers that do not have disabilities get to experience some of those things. So if they're identifying a goal that, in fact, they may have thought that they might like to do, but, so for example, I remember I was a VR counselor also, and I remember I had this young man who said that only thing he wanted to be able to do was to drive a taxi. And of course, he could not drive a taxi because this individual was legally blind. So he was not going to get a license. But we talked with him about, okay, well, what about wanting to drive a taxi appeals to you? What do you like about that? And getting him to explore that eventually led to what he really likes to do is work on that microphone that they have in taxi companies. And he was very interested in that. And that was his passion. And so we were able to, schedule an internship for him. And he later came back to us after he finished his college degree. And he said, I would have never thought this. He said, I said to you I wanted to be a taxi driver, but from having that experience, I realized I may not be able to drive a taxi, but there's nothing stopping me from owning a taxi cab company.
Oh, that's right. Wonderful.
And that's exactly what he did. And he got to do that microphone, probably more than he ever thought about. But that's what his passion was. And that's exactly, where that experience led to. So that is so important also.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
So talk about for a moment the kinds of services. So we know that you guys provide pre-employment transition services. And we also know that pre-employment transition services came about in 2014 under the new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act rules and regulations for the vocational rehabilitation program. And prior to that, there was a deficit and a lack of opportunity for the agencies not only to focus on youth because of their high caseload counts that they typically will have, but also to get credit for the work that they do. But also equally important was really focusing on those areas that really help youth to really obtain that confidence and self-advocacy skills that are so important to individuals. So talk about what specific services, which ones of those 5 core services do you guys focus on?
So we focus. We have 3 that we really hone in on, and so one is like you just mentioned, self advocacy. That is, we feel our biggest goal is to make sure that all of our students are able to advocate for themselves and understand the importance of it and how to do that appropriately and respectfully. So that's a big focus for us. Another of our main focuses is job exploration, and that's where we talked about those interests. So we explored these different types of jobs where we'll go to TJ Maxx and we'll restock some shelves, or we'll go to Stripling's and learn about the butcher shop, or we'll go to, like today we went to Lane Southern Orchards and we learned about, they have different opportunities there. They have a packing plant, they have an agriculture center where they plant trees and flowers and strawberries, that kind of thing. They also have like a deli and a retail side. So they got to experience a whole lot today. That's where we went, was Lane Southern Orchards. And our next big focus, so I said 3, one was self-advocacy. The other one was job exploration. The next one is workplace readiness training. And that one, we really focus on like hard and soft skills in the workplace. So we're not just exploring like what are our interests and what's this job about or that job about. We're actually doing a physical activity that helps prepare us for the workplace.
So one thing that we did with that is we took them to Goodwill, and we do a whole dressing for success, dressing the part, how to present yourself well, being interview ready. And so we let them all go and pick out an interview appropriate outfit. So we do mock interviews, and we do job fairs, reverse job fairs, and their resumes, making sure that the resumes are they're understanding what it is, and that they not only understand but can also produce one themselves. And we make sure that they are ready for whatever job interest that they have, and knowing their worth. Networking and relationship building. How to fill out important documents. That sort of thing.
And then there are 2 other ones that we do. There, like you mentioned, there are 5. And so another one that we work on is counseling in post-secondary enrollment. And so that one is more specific. It's specific to either doing assessments or figuring out fundraising, like, filling out your FAFSA, that kind of thing, and getting ready for post-secondary. And the other one is work-based learning, not work-based training. So there's a little bit of a different work-based learning is when we actually go into a location and we volunteer there for training, right? So we'll if we go to like she mentioned, Miss Mary mentioned going to Goodwill to shop for interview clothes. Well, that's workplace readiness. But when we go to Goodwill and we actually help them stock the shelves, that is work-based learning, where we're there doing an activity at the job site, that kind of thing. And so those are all several different areas, those 5 areas. The main 3, like I said, that we focus on month after month are usually self-advocacy, workplace readiness, and job exploration. Those are kind of like where we stay.
That workplace readiness and also even self-advocacy, as well as, the work-based learning are so important for the disability community, and particularly for youth, because again, they just don't have that opportunity, but also they can have misconceptions about what the jobs really do, during the day. Some jobs look very glamorous from a different distance, but when you're actually performing the job duties of that job, someone may come out with a very different idea and say, you know what, that's not what I really want to do. Or the opposite, they could say, wow, I didn't think this was even possible. I love doing this. And so getting that opportunity to experience those kinds of skills and learning the skills, is really critical.
Yes, we agree.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
So how do people get referred to Team Academy? And then also, how did you guys get into pre-employment transition services? What about you as individuals made this an area that you have an interest in?
Okay. So I'll answer your last question first, and then I'm gonna let Mr. Larry talk about how you get into becoming a part of our program. So for me, it was a very personal choice that lend itself to be a wonderful professional choice as well. But I'm a parent of a special needs child, and he passed. And so it very much, I turned my pain into a passion. And I get to honor him every day that I get to help one of our students, one of our adult clients. And it's an amazing opportunity that I get to have. And in honoring him and getting to inspire individuals to be their very best and to not give up. And now, obviously, I get to do this in representation as well as of Mr. Riley. And he is our founder. And he started this company 22 years ago out in Louisiana and had a vision. And so I am more than honored and blessed to be able to carry that on and honor both of those amazing individuals in hopefully a very wonderful way.
Great. How about you, Larry?
Yes, ma'am. So what got me into it? Part of it was that was Miss Mary. Seeing her involved in this career field really inspired me to explore this career field. Now I have training as a therapist, and I worked as a marriage and family therapist for a while, and that's where I'm classically trained in that area. But I really wanted to feel like I was making more of an impact. And so like our personal motto with one another is that we want to be the difference that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt like this is it, right? So in doing my therapy and doing therapy with people, I found that financial struggles were a solid 80% of the reason that people were coming to see me. Really, like at the heart of the matter, there was a lot of financial hardship going on. And I felt like if I could help people vocationally, if I could help people get a job, have a job, that sort of thing, and develop fulfillment in their career, then I'd be solving the problem before it ever happened.
Mm-hmm. That is
Yeah.
so important. Yeah, absolutely. And we oftentimes forget that, if you don't have the opportunity to really understand, both personal finances and how that contributes not only to your self-worth, but also, to your skills and also to what kinds of things you're going to be able to accomplish in your future as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And how do people find you at Team Academy? So are these individuals connected to vocational rehabilitation programs? And how do you determine whether or not they're eligible for Team Academy services?
So we have a couple of different things. We have like two different categories basically of clients. One is our pre-employment transition services, and all of those clients are 14 to 22-year-old high school students. And so we get referred those students by either the school system or the GVRA counselor recommends us to the school system. So that's kind of how that works. And then our other category of client is called a VR client, and they're all post high school graduate. So there isn't an age limit on that one. So you can be 22 or you can be 65. There's no age limit on that one. And that is individuals typically searching for a job or in the process of figuring out what they want to do after high school, obviously. So and everyone that we work with has some sort of disability, and so they get referred to us. Everyone gets referred to us by the GVRA, and if someone in the community sees us and they say, "Hey, I know somebody you could be a help with," then we just refer them back to the GVRA and we say, "Here, this is your first step."
And then once they're referred to the GVRA, they can request Team Academy. So if they specifically would like for us to provide services to them, they can specifically ask for us, and then they will be directed in the right direction.
Do services cost any of the students anything to be a part of your program?
No, ma'am, absolutely. It does not cost the students anything. It is a free program provided by Team Academy to them. It is a state and federally ran program. And so we, as a company, anything that we do with our students or our adult clients, as far even as that goes, is we incur all of the expenses. So if we take them on a field trip or every field trip that we go on, we always go out to eat because we want to have that dining experience. I say it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to be about it. We took a group to DC this year, Washington DC, and Team Academy incurred all of those expenses. We provided the flight, we stayed at the Hyatt, we had a fine dining experience, we went on a bus tour, and I mean, it was just absolutely wonderful. I can't say enough wonderful things about it. But no, ma'am, it is completely free to our students.
And how long are people in the program itself?
So they can enter the program at age 14, and then they age out of pre-ets at 22. And then after 22, though, it's not over necessarily. If they choose to stay in the program, then they become a VR client.
And that's important because that does provide that continuum of learning, for them, but also then the counselor themselves are in a much better position now to work with those individuals after having some of those experiences that they've had with Team Academy.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. And so once they move from, let's say at 22, or when they graduate from high school, even if they're not 22, let's say they're 19 and they graduate high school, once they graduate, they transition to a VR client if they choose to. And there are a few different tracks they can take as a VR client. And if they request, again, Team Academy, they want to continue that relationship, we're there for them. We provide assessment services at that stage. If it's requested by the counselor, we also provide job placement services, and we provide supported employment services. So there's a few differences. Job placement is we're just helping you find the job, get the job. Supported employment is for the life of the job. And so there's no age limit or time limit on that one. Supported employment, once we help you get a job as a client, if you're a supported employment client, we never leave you so long as you have that job. If you have the job for 10 years, you're going to hear from someone at Team Academy at least once a month, checking in on you.
Complete support.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's really important because, as we know, particularly for young people, they can go through different periods of time, particularly if they have mental health issues that they may be fine at the time, but they may be going through some challenges, with that and need some additional support.
Yes, ma'am.
And I always like to talk about the families because I can imagine that these services are very important to the families because family members they are focusing on their children, and they obviously want the best, for their children. And some of them may not necessarily be focused on the fact that their son or their daughter may be able to work. And there are a host of reasons, as we well know, particularly when you think about after high school. We call it the cliff effect, because they fall off after high school and they may lose services. And, then you have things like SSI or SSDI if they've already gotten a job, but there's challenges with that because the families may be focusing particularly on the fact that there's a lot of medical issues, and they need to keep that insurance, the medical insurance, whether it's Medicaid, for those individuals. So talk about the families and the role that they play with Team Academy.
Well, families and having that supportive environment is so super imperative to our students' success, and they play a vital role in supporting these individuals as far as being a natural support to them, and making sure that these individuals have those natural supports is so imperative, again, to their success, because like you said, there is that cliff effect, and there's a lot of times that after they graduate or they make that transition, that they feel like, oh my goodness, where is everyone? Everything has changed, but they need that constant, that natural support, whether it be for transportation needs or whether it be for helping to fill out documents and forms, whatever the need may be. It is super imperative that they have that within, their support unit. And most of the time it is the family, someone within the family, whether it's the parents, the grandparents, aunties, that are vital in that role of being that natural support to that student. I'll give an example. We have one student that is entering in Warm Springs after transitioning, graduating from high school this year. And Warm Springs, by the way, is a technical college that provides free, might I add, free services, so our students can receive certificates from there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful program. I can't say enough good things about that. But anyway, he's making that transition, and he needs the support of his family as far as transportation. So he's going to be staying there throughout the week, but on the weekend, one of his things is he would only go if he could go home on the weekend. And so they are going to arrange transportation for him, I think, kind of have a system worked out where the auntie will go one weekend and then the mom and that sort of thing to get him. But it's having those support systems in place, and families do provide that in a wonderful way. And them coming, even to IEP meetings and that sort of thing is so important, because their feedback of not just what we get to see when we go into the schools, but what is presenting itself at home as well. And, being able to bridge that golden thread that bridges that gap between home life and then school/professional life, and finding that balance there is super imperative. And those families provide that sort of feedback.
We also know, too, that mentoring plays an important role in the lives of people with disabilities, because it serves as that opportunity to have a role model or talk to others through peer support groups, or just learning that others have experienced similar things that they are in fact experiencing also. So do you have students that come back and want to mentor others who are coming through the program?
So we have a few different kind of examples for that. We have one postgraduate student who was it 2 school years ago was a student of ours, and she's graduated and she's enrolled at Fort Valley State. And so we let her know anytime that we're going to bring one of our classrooms to Fort Valley State to get that outside the classroom experience, and she'll meet us there and talk to her fellow students, about her situation and how we helped her transition from high school to Fort Valley State. And she talks about her experiences there, and she serves as a role model for students that we have now. And that's a personal example, But we also have some guest speakers that we rotate around. We have one in particular who's a personal trainer in his professional career, but he takes time out and offers even lessons to some of our students if they show an interest in that sort of thing. So we have a few mentors that were students of ours, and some from the community who come into our classes,
and even some VR clients that transitioned into VR that come in and do speeches as well, just to make everything so much more relatable, and I think that's super important. But yes, we do have students that come in and speak to our former students that will come in and speak to our now present students. And it is always super motivating and inspiring to hear that, for sure.
That is great. And it is so important, as you said, to have that experience. I also like to focus on the employers, because we know that the employer community is very valuable to the disability community, but also professionally, to the vocational rehabilitation program and its counselors. And I'm just curious about what kinds of interaction, what kinds of networking do you do with employers, number one, to help them learn about Team Academy, but also that sensitivity awareness training, if you will, about who some of the students are served by Team Academy and how employers can play an important role in giving these students these experiences.
Absolutely. So there are multiple businesses that we work with our students within our community. Some of them being Bass Pro Shop, Stripling's, Buc-ee's, TJ Maxx, Ross, just to name a few. And so we go, like we said, we give them that exposure. And then most of the time through that exposure, they have some kind of interests. And we find out what those are. And then that employer typically always will pass out applications to our students that are interested. And through that, obviously, they're able to gain and receive employment, but they are super important, working with them, networking with them in the community. Mr. Larry, I know you wanted to say something.
And so part of how we do that is when we do these like site visits where we go to, like Miss Mary mentioned, TJ Maxx or Bass Pro Shop, most of the time it's the general manager of that location who comes and talks to our students about what it's like to work there and guides the tour. So that manager or HR manager, we get to meet those people. They have seen these students, right? So when they come to apply for a job there, there's usually some sort of recognition that happens. Like Bass Pro Shop was mentioned. Well, they let us know on our last 2 tours ago that they were needing some seasonal help, and 2 of our students were able to pick up applications, apply, and pick up a part-time job there at Bass Pro Shop just from that visit. So we really develop a relationship with employers in the community by visiting those places, and we vet those places before we ever take a site visit. So Miss Mary mentioned Stripling's. Well, we've gone into those locations several times before we've ever taken any of our classrooms in there, and kind of sat down with the general manager in there and just talked about the services we provide, the students we'd like to bring in there, and what our end goals are. And so
building that rapport with them, that relationship with these businesses is super important for us as a company. So that, like Mr. Larry said, when our students walk in, there is already an established connection there, which always works out to be very advantageous for us, for sure, and our students. And, and like I said, them having that experience, though, because had we not taken them out in the community and took them to Buc-ee's, they would have never been able to have that experience and receive that application and then be able to obtain that job. But because we got them out in the community and we explored their interest, and it led us to there, and that's just a super wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also in the vocational rehabilitation program, as you know, being able to be integrated into the community is so important. It's the founding principle of the vocational rehabilitation program, so that individuals are not, just isolated, but they're in the community. They're embedded. They're working alongside of their co-workers who may not have a disability, but they get to see, what that experience is like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like you said, the end goal is competitive, integrated employment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we hope to achieve that, is through exposure in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so important. I can remember, getting my first job as a teenager too, and being able to get that first paycheck, and how important that was. I worked in a hospital, and so it was so important to me. I was so proud of the fact that I could wear a nursing uniform and the nursing shoes, even though I wasn't a nurse, but it was as close as I was ever going to get,
like you said, it gave you a sense of pride, and that's so important.
It absolutely did. Yes. Yep. And I want to also talk about self-employment, because we know that vocational rehabilitation counselors, they focus a lot on employment, but they also have people, who are interested in self-employment. And so I would love to explore what kinds of services, what kinds of supports does Team Academy have for individuals who are specifically interested in being self-employed. You talked earlier about the gentleman who, wanted to shovel snow, but I imagine that people, students may have dreams about having their own business. And so, but do they really know what that entails? Do they have that experience, in their families, for example, or how do they get the knowledge and the experiences to really understand what it means to be self-employed?
That's a wonderful question. And so we walk them through that, if that is something that they are interested in as far as being self-employed. We walk them through that and all that entails. And we actually just had an individual that we have walked through and went through this journey with as far as self-employment, and he owns his own business now. So Mr. Larry, you want to talk about that and what all that gentleman went through?
Yeah, so like Miss Mary was saying, that's something that we do help with, and the GVRA also has provisions for that for our clients. And then Team Academy, I said that my training is as a therapist, but I also have 2 business degrees, one in marketing and one in management. And so with this gentleman, when he expressed an interest to be self-employed, we really vetted that first, make sure that that's what you want to get into. And then we walk him through setting up his business, even like with the Secretary of State, and forming an LLC and getting his EIN number, going through setting up a bank account with him, writing a business plan, all of those sorts of things, so that we have a really good idea of what we're getting into, and we're legally doing it, right?
Yeah,
We're not just out here. We're not just out here setting up a booth selling cakes because we can. Right. We're out here. We've got our business license. We're official. We've got a bank account. Those sorts of things. And I really try to focus on the activities and helping. I tried to help him understand that as a business owner, you can't think about what you're doing as an hourly paid person. You can't just show up and just do this work and then go home. Like, as a business owner, you really don't ever really leave it, right? So even if you take a day off, that's fine. You can leave the premises, but it's always in your mind. You're always going to think about it. So make sure this is something that you really want to do.
Yes. And saying that, we also do career scope on our clients, which really helps with that as far as their interests and, where their barriers may be and where their strengths are. It really provides a lot of useful information for that. But also in all of those things that we do, like Mr. Larry spoke about, we also provide that mentor being a mentor and being that coach that they're going to need, so they really truly understand, what they're getting into and what it's going to, as far as require of them, of their time, of their effort, of their energy. Because as we all know, if you're a business owner, that, when you work for someone else, you have a sort of a net there that you don't have whenever you are employed, self-employed. And so making sure that they understand all of the wonderful things that come from that, but also all of the challenges that provides as well. And ensuring with themselves that is truly what they want to do. So when times get challenging, and sometimes they will, we can be that support person to remind them of, hey, you remember, this is why you wanted to do this, and we're going to be successful at this, being that encouraging, supportive voice.
And pointing them in the right direction if they need further support, like to the SBA and the Chamber of Commerce, setting up accounts there, and really being networked in the community is also important.
Yes.
For these, especially these small business owners. And we think that it's a wonderful thing. At least I do, and I'm pretty sure Miss Mary does too, especially if somebody wants to do that. Like, we have another student whose plan is to start a lawn care business. And so knowing that while he's in high school and he's really dedicated to that, we already kind of start letting him understand the cost of getting into that business, how to go about getting clients and those sort of things. And so he's already well on his way to establishing himself when he graduates.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always interesting too when you look at, regardless of the business that you're in at any given time, that our society and our economic, agencies, organizations, communities, it's not an ebb and flow. It's an up and down. It can be very steady, but it can also, be looking at times of recession. So how you protect yourself and situate yourself so that when those hard times do come, that you have in place a mechanism for being able to at least manage through that period of time.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I want to talk about investments for a second, because it's something that we don't always talk about with the disability community. And I remember when I first got my first level professional job, someone was great to take me aside and said, all right, you got this job. It's a professional level job. What are you going to do to save money? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I had no idea. I have a bank account, but I don't know what that means in terms of, I've got a place, where my check goes into, but in terms of the future, thinking about your retirement, thinking about, strategies for growth. And we don't often spend a lot of time with people with disabilities, particularly. You don't have to be self-employed to be thinking about that. We've got some great new programs, well, not so new anymore, but, the ABLE Act, which we've had some new iterations of, where people who are, older, now can participate. And I think that is so great, because we need to be educating people about preparing yourself for your future and having that investment knowledge in terms of what it means to save money, and how do you need to understand how to make your finances grow and make, appropriate decisions. Do you really need that Cadillac, that you're going to buy, or are you just going to look at, basic transportation, because that money will take you a lot further than, spending $50,000-$60,000 on a Cadillac, and then later on you don't have any money.
That's right. Great question. So, first of all, I would like to answer that as far as, that's a lot of what TEAM stands for. So TEAM is an acronym. It's not spelled TEAM like you typically would see it. Each letter means something. And so T is time. our time management. We're all given a certain amount of time. And if we want to be successful in life, we are going to have to manage our time appropriately. The next is E, and that is emotional competence. So to be emotionally competent means to manage our emotions in a healthy manner, which we know in life sometimes we have challenges that arise, but how do we deal with those things? And do we make sure that they don't impair our success in any way? And then the next E is energy. So you can have all of the time allotted in the appropriate places. You can be emotionally competent, but if you don't get up and do something about it, if you don't put the energy where it's needed, your probability of being successful has lessened greatly. But then the last one, and one of the most important ones, is at the end, but it's no less important, is money. It is money management. It is one of the four things that team finds super important as far as teaching our students to be successful. Because like you said, Janet, you can have $1 million, but if you spend $1,000,001, you're just as broke as before you ever had the million.
Absolutely.
And so making sure that our students understand that, yes, while that paycheck is wonderful and the sense of pride and all of these things, it's so great and grand, what are you going to do with it though? And making sure that they understand the appropriate way to go about managing your money, what's going to be most beneficial for them. And that always depends on us individually and our needs, right? And where we place those. And one of the ways that we start out with this in our classes, excuse me, is we start them with a savings bucket, and each student receives a bucket at the beginning of the school year with $1, and they clock in and out of class every day just like they would a job. So we get that experience, and they have 5 things that they have to do in order to get paid at the end of class. They have to be respectful, they have to be present, they have to have a good attitude, they have to participate to the fullest, and they have to do their best. And we feel as a company that that's something that everyone can do regardless of their functionality or their disability. We can all do those 5 things. And just like at work, you have tasks, and you must accomplish those tasks in order to be able to be done at the end of the day. And so when we're done with class, they clock out and they receive $1 for that day. And at the end of the year, they get to not only have the money that they have earned, but we also match it as a company. And so they have, throughout the year, though, goal set. We have learned about financial literacy and budgeting and saving and retirement and 401ks and taxes and all of these things that are so important to money management. And then they have set goals of how they want to spend that money and what they want to do with it. And one of the things that we encourage is for them to open up their own checking account. And we help them with that, and explain to them what that's going to entail and the importance of them having that financial independence as well. But you only have as much financial independence as you allow yourself to have based on your wisdom with money management, right?
Absolutely. And I can remember being a teenager and getting SSI benefits. And I remember before I got them, I depended on my parents and the kids, in the family. Like most families, you depend on your parents to give you something. And it's interesting because you have a lot easier time spending their money. But when you're actually earning your own money, it just becomes a different thing. And it's just like, well, you either learn that, not everybody learns that, but, it's something that you strive for, because then it becomes harder, to waste your own money, and you have goals and you want to identify those goals that, that are going to help you certainly for the future.
Absolutely.
So, like Miss Mary was saying, in the classroom, we do a lot of focus on financial literacy, and that's part of self-advocacy and job exploration and workplace readiness. We get to kind of tie all those codes in together when we start talking about financial literacy, and we help our students understand not just money math, not just how do taxes work and how does tipping work, that kind of thing, but especially when we start talking about getting a job and having a paycheck, we talk about an emergency fund and having 3 months of bill money set aside in case that rainy day comes, in case that recession comes, in case an emergency happens. We talk about Murphy's Law, and if anything can go wrong, it will. So
Yes.
if you're prepared for that, then that's just one of the tenets. I mean, we spend quite a bit of time on financial literacy and helping students understand that you got to do it for yourself, right? And so we also get into, like Miss Mary said, we get into some of the Roth IRA ideas and how that works, and some of the 401k stuff, how that works, and so that they have like a 10,000 foot view of what that looks like. Now, as a VR client, so after pre-eds, as a VR client, it's a much more in-depth conversation that we have about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. And I always like to ask guests if there was what's missing, if there was something that you don't have right now as part of your program, or if there was something that you wish you could do, but you don't have the ability to do it right now, and that could be around partnerships, it could be around, additional funding. What's missing? Where are the gaps? And if you had a wish list, what would you like?
So one of our things that we do now in the classroom that could be better is we help our students who are of appropriate age study for their learner's permit. But we would love to expand that program and get some driving simulators and actually be able to assist with like in Georgia, there's Joshua's Law, and you have to do so many hours on the simulator. We'd like to be able to provide those kind of services to our clients, but that piece for independence we're kind of missing as far as the simulators go.
So yeah, I think that if we had, as far as a wish list goes, having a driving simulator would be very advantageous for the company, just simply because we do teach drivers ed for them to obtain their learner's permit, but we would like to go further with that and be able to provide them with the assistance that they're going to need to obtain their actual driver's license. And it is a barrier that a lot of our students have, one, because they either, one, don't have the support, or two, they don't have the ability, to make it up to the office where they can obtain that and be able to get all of the instruction that they're going to need in the time. Because like Mr. Larry said, now there's Joshua Law here in the state of Georgia, and they have to have a certain amount of time behind the wheel or the simulator before they're able to obtain that license. And if they don't have someone that can take them, then a lot of them just don't get to receive one until they're 18 years old. So that's very important for them. And that's something that I would like to have. I think that would be a great asset to us.
Yeah, and that certainly helps them with also thinking about the issue of going to work, because if we're in a large state in Georgia, and so being able to have that driver's license really contributes to the likelihood that individuals will be successful both in being able to find work but also sustain it.
Absolutely. Yes. And it also, again, it's such an achievement, for them to be able to say that that is a goal that they have set for themselves and accomplished is a wonderful thing. And imperative to them continuing to proceed with being successful and not falling off of that cliff, so to speak, when they make that transition from high school.
And when you think about it today, driving is such a part of the American passage, for young people to be able to get their driver's license. It's such a huge accomplishment, like you said. And when you're left out of that process, we're always talking about inclusion, and that's where inclusion matters, because, we want them to have the same experience that they would have with their peers.
Yes, absolutely. It's so super important. Like you said, it's a conversation that is very popular, obviously, with their peers. And to be able to have that kind of conversation and share that experience is important to the, like you said, inclusion in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both so much for her joining us and talking about Team Academy, but also I always like to end by commending guests for looking at some of these issues, but not only just looking at them, but being very proactive about, being able to provide these services and to reduce the barriers that individuals, in this particular case, students with disabilities often face. And so I love this program. I love, Team Academy. And I think that this program definitely positions youth, for employment, but also more importantly, to be a part of the community. And that's just absolutely necessary, but it's a life goal that we all have.
Yes,
Yeah.
we agree. Well, thank you so much, Dr. LaBreck, for having us on. And we are so thankful that we get to do this and get to be the difference that makes a difference. So thank you for all that you do as well. And we appreciate having the invite.
You're very welcome.